Hello friends and enemies, and welcome back to another video. And today I got something special for you guys. I gotta thank Renita Monson for suggesting this video on the nearly lost episode of Moral Orel, Abstinence. Now the interesting thing about this episode, and I'm sure that you will be able to notice this from the episode, was that it was not made with the same level of TV quality as the rest of the show. And this is because this episode was made after the show was cancelled in 2009 for free by the crew. All the sets and the puppets were made from scratch or from scraps by the show, by the dedicated crew members who really believed in the importance of making this show. And as I'm sure you guys know, stop motion shows are extremely time consuming to create, so let's just take a moment to thank those crew members who spent hours and hours to make this extra episode of Moral Orel. This episode starts out with Orel and Doi saying bye to what seems to be a traveling chorus of gay men, and they state how bringing them to Moralton was a mistake. We can assume that this episode starts out right after another adventure that we never actually get to see. Either way, it's currently nighttime, but it's still too early for Doi to go home, and while Doi tries to come up with things to do, Orel reminds them that they all need the sun to be able to do, so Doi is at a loss on how he should spend his time, until Orel suggests that he should try and help people. So Doi does that. He goes around town trying to help people, but in a similar way to Orel, when Orel tries to help people, it ends up just making him mad. He ends up making Principal Fakey have to pay for a fake nurse's outfit after Nurse Bendy leaves the sex shop because the principal threw an outfit over her face in an attempt to hide the fact that he has taken the school nurse to the sex shop with him. Doi also reminds some woman who was going to leave the bar with Mr. Papermouth, the police officer, that there is a Mrs. Papermouth, and the lady leaves, even though he told her that she had left him. And very surprisingly, he shoots at Doi in anger while the boy runs away. Now something interesting here lore-wise is that Doi comes across Mr. Creepler's ice cream truck and decides that he wants to help him out. So he ends up following him inside the apartment building, where Doi finds him hunched over Miss Sculpton's body with a knife. It can be clearly assumed that Doi is walking into a rape that is about to happen, but he is just oblivious to it at the moment. After he is told to leave by Mr. Creepler, Miss Sculpton is seen sleeping, and Mr. Creepler says she's not even scared anymore, suggesting that this isn't the first time that he has visited her. Eventually, Doi ends up back home and says hello to his parents and even kisses his mom on the cheek, to which she finds gross and ends up having to take a shower. His dad Carl lets him know that his mother is his girl and that Doi just being a third wheel, and how he's been a problem ever since he was born. Carl tells Doi that he needs to get a night job, and that he made some calls and got him a position at Phony's Crops Farms for the graveyard shift. Anyways, Doi's job is to be a cockblock, literally. As we've seen so far in the examples of the episode, that Doi is especially good at stopping people from having sex. His job is that he just has to stop the roosters from getting to the chickens. And surprisingly, Doi is amazing at the job, and it seems that he really enjoys it. But eventually the farmer gets a message stating that eggs are now illegal. The farmer blames Orel because he had recently shown Orel how eggs are made. It is interesting that this law was able to pass, considering how Miss Censordoll, an egg lover, has the mayor in her back pocket. Anyways, the farmer is forced to lay off Doi, so in response, Doi begs Orel to change his mind about the eggs. Miss Censordoll overhears the conversation and hires Doi to go around town forcing abstinence on people. He eventually gets caught and is punished by never being allowed to wear a mask again. Surprisingly, Miss Censordoll does not seem remorseful about this and seems to be plotting other ways to use Doi to try to make people miserable as she is about her eggs. We flash forward to the next year during Halloween. Orel runs into Doi and is talking about how he can't wear a mask anymore because he got caught. And the two end up having a conversation about niceness and lovemaking in Moralton. They say how niceness can happen in Moralton, but it often just turns dirty, and how since niceness doesn't happen often, and when it does, it feels so unnatural and dirty that they end up making it into something dirty. It's never just genuine kindness. It always has to end up being some ulterior motive. This episode ends with Orel doing something nice for Doi by hanging out with him at night, even though the activity he suggested needs the sun to do. I think it's important because Orel's starting to see that it's a cycle in Moralton that nobody is genuinely nice to one another, so when it does happen, they end up making it something dirty. So Orel takes that first step in doing something nice for his friend without any ulterior motive. So first of all, I just wanted to say what an amazing job the creators did with the limited amount of resources that they had in this episode. I also like the amount of additional lore that they added here, especially with confirming how Miss Skoltum did have a previous series of visits from Mr. Creepler. It wasn't just a one-time thing, otherwise I assumed she'd be in more distress. One thing that really surprised me was how against eggs Orel was. I feel like he would have just considered it another one of God's creations, so it would be okay for him. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm surprised that Miss Central let this law pass, especially considering the control she has over Clay in the series. In my previous video about the episode Trigger, we got to see how the relationship is with Doe and his parents. And this episode just furthers those points, and that his parents really rather not have him around at all. The biggest thing I got out of this episode was a talk that Orel and Doe had at the end about being nice in Moralton. And it's true, in this series people are mostly out for themselves. So much so that the act of genuine kindness that someone tries to do, like Orel has done throughout most of the series, ends up backfiring and turning into something bad. People in Moralton just fetishize niceness due to how rare it is. It's almost like an unspoken taboo. It's sad to see that this was the last piece of work that the crew was able to work on together. This series was something special, and said important things that people can often overlook nowadays, because that's just the way things are now. Even in this episode, being nice and how rare it is, that's something real. In big cities, in real life, most people are out for themselves and there isn't a lot of genuine kindness that goes around. Before I end this episode, I'd like to thank Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare for being a Patreon and for supporting the content. I really do appreciate the support. If any of you guys want to support the content and the channel, the Patreon will be linked in the description below. Don't feel obligated to do so, viewing is more than enough. I appreciate all the support nonetheless. Make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe if you're new here. And until next time, it's been a pleasure to know y'all, but now I gotta go.